A single object can shatter our entire story of the past. These are out-of-place artifacts, physical mysteries that defy the timelines written in every textbook. By the end of this journey, you will see 25 pieces of evidence that challenge the very foundations of history. We will examine a 2,000-year-old device capable of predicting eclipses, and a medieval map that shows a continent hidden under ice for millennia. What do you believe is waiting to be discovered? The true power of these discoveries lies in their precise contradiction. An out-of-place artifact is not simply ancient, it is anachronistic. It feels like a visitor from another time, possessing a level of craftsmanship or a piece of knowledge that should not, according to all our textbooks, exist in its era. Think of it as finding a smartphone carefully sealed within a Victorian-era desk. The object itself is not mysterious because it is old, but because its capabilities are wildly out of sync with everything else we know about that period. The historian Derek de Solla Price framed this challenge perfectly, suggesting we must sometimes suspend disbelief and consider the impossible. These artifacts force that exact mental exercise. They are not just oddities, they are direct evidence that something in our historical timeline is either missing or misunderstood. Often, they represent technological sophistication in an age labeled primitive, or they show cultural connections across distances deemed impassable. A common battery from 2 millennia ago, or a medieval chart depicting a continent buried under ice for thousands of years, these are not just puzzles. They are quiet, persistent arguments against the completeness of our story. Each one is a single crack in a vast wall of accepted history, and where there is one crack, the possibility of a deeper structural flaw begins to seem very real. Deep within a museum drawer for decades, it was dismissed as a curious but unremarkable piece of wreckage that changed when advanced imaging finally peered inside the corroded bronze shell. What it revealed was not a statue or a simple tool, but a miniature cosmos of interlocking gears, a mechanical mind of staggering complexity. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. Its creation is placed around 100 years before the Common Era. For over 2,000 years, it rested on the seafloor, its secrets locked away by layers of calcified corrosion. When researchers finally saw its inner workings, they were looking at a device that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. It was, in every sense, an ancient analog computer. The mechanism was not a single gear, but a sophisticated system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and mounted within a wooden frame. By turning a hand crank on the side, the entire assembly would whir into motion. Its dials and pointers did not tell the time of day, they plotted the dance of the heavens. It could predict the positions of the sun and moon, the phases of the lunar cycle, and even the timing of solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. One of its most fascinating functions was tracking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, linking celestial mechanics to human cultural events. This was not a toy or a speculative model, it was a working calculator for the cosmos. The profound mystery here is not simply that the ancient Greeks understood astronomy. We have always known that. The shock is the medium. They translated that abstract mathematical knowledge into precise physical machinery. The level of miniaturization, the understanding of gear ratios to mimic celestial cycles, the integration of multiple astronomical theories into one portable device, all of this speaks to a workshop tradition, a school of engineering that our historical narratives have completely overlooked. It implies a lineage of master craftsmen and mathematician engineers whose names are lost to us. This was technology of a caliber that would not be seen again until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. So what happened? How does knowledge this advanced, this concretely manifested, simply vanish from the record? The most likely answer is a painful one, a slow fading of specialized craft through generations of social upheaval, conflict, and the gradual loss of the very workshops that built such things. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a silent, bronze testament to a peak of Hellenistic science that was reached, and then, for a very long time, forgotten. It forces us to ask what other peaks of human ingenuity have been lost in the quiet collapses between the ages we remember. While the Antikythera Mechanism represents a lost pinnacle of mechanical genius, another discovery speaks to a quieter, more fundamental kind of knowledge. It is not a complex machine, but a simple clay jar that might have held a spark of the future, unearthed from the ruins of a Parthian settlement near modern-day Baghdad. This unassuming object consists of just 3 parts: a clay pot, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod. When archaeologists first assembled these pieces in the 1930s, a startling hypothesis emerged. If this vessel were filled with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, the chemical reaction between the copper, the iron, and the electrolyte would generate a small but measurable electric charge. Dated roughly between 250 years before the Common Era and 250 years after, this so-called Baghdad Battery sits in a profound historical silence. For centuries, the accepted narrative placed the purposeful discovery of electricity much later, with figures like Luigi Galvani and Alessandro Volta in the 18th and 19th centuries. Yet here is a physical object that seems to demonstrate a working understanding of electrochemical principles a full 2 millennia prior. The debate over its true purpose is where the mystery truly lies. Was it a tool for early electroplating, perhaps to deposit a thin layer of gold onto silver for decorative objects? Could it have served a medicinal or therapeutic role with the mild tingling current applied for relief? Or was its function tied to the spiritual, creating a mysterious sensation during religious ceremonies? Each theory is plausible, yet none have been definitively proven. This ambiguity is precisely what makes the artifact so compelling. It is not a clear-cut battery with wires and a light bulb, but a potential one. It represents an idea, an experimental thread. The most fascinating possibility is not that the Parthians had a national power grid, but that some curious individual or group stumbled upon a natural phenomenon and sought to bottle it. They observed a reaction, assembled these specific materials, and created a device that could reliably reproduce a tiny flow of energy. This suggests a culture of practical experimentation, of tinkering with the physical world to see what it might yield. If that thread of investigation had been followed, nurtured, and expanded upon, who knows what path technology might have taken? The Baghdad Battery, therefore, is less about a specific use and more about a lost opportunity. It is evidence of a spark of understanding that, for reasons lost to time, never caught fire. It challenges the comforting idea of linear progress, reminding us that innovation is not a steady march forward, but a fragile flame that can be ignited, forgotten, and rediscovered centuries later across a different civilization. The desire to touch the sky is not a modern invention. In a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a small wooden artifact, carved roughly 200 years before the Common Era. At first glance, it is a simple bird, a common symbol in ancient Egyptian art, but a closer look reveals a detail that does not fit the natural world. While the body and wings are avian, the tail is completely unique. It is not horizontal like a bird's tail feathers, but vertical, a distinct fin-like structure that rises straight up from the body. To the modern eye, it bears a startling resemblance to the vertical stabilizer on the tail of an airplane. This is the Saqqara Bird, and its unusual design has launched a debate that spans from the halls of museums to the workshops of aeronautical engineers. The mainstream interpretation is practical and grounded. Most Egyptologists see it as a ceremonial object, perhaps a representation of a falcon linked to the god Horus, or simply a child's toy. It is a beautiful artifact, but one without a hidden purpose. Yet, a small group of researchers, including specialists in aerodynamics, have tested replicas in wind tunnels. Their findings suggest the Saqqara bird's wings are not just decorative, they are airfoils shaped in a way that could generate lift. When launched with a small weight added to its nose, some replicas have reportedly achieved stable, short gliding flights. This analysis transforms the object from a static carving into a potential model, a test piece for understanding the principles of flight. The core question is one of intent. Were the ancient Egyptians merely skilled carvers who accidentally stumbled upon an aerodynamic shape while crafting a stylized bird? Or was this a deliberate experiment, an attempt to capture and replicate the mechanics of gliding, inspired by close observation of birds in flight? There is no evidence of a full-scale version, no ancient Egyptian hangar. The artifact exists in a frustrating silence, but its very existence with that precise vertical tail challenges a comfortable assumption. It suggests that the intellectual curiosity required to analyze flight, to abstract its principles into a physical form, may have been present far earlier than we credit. The Saqqara bird does not prove the Egyptians built aircraft. Instead, it opens a window onto a different possibility, that the dream of flight and the first tentative steps toward engineering it might be woven into the human story much deeper than our textbooks acknowledge. It is a whisper from the past, asking us if our ancestors looked at the birds not just as symbols but as blueprints. A geode should hold only crystal, a beautiful secret of slow geological time. But in 1961, 3 rock collectors in California's Coso Mountains split one open and found something entirely different. Inside the hardened nodule was a small, mechanical-looking artifact, a ceramic cylinder surrounding a metallic core, all held within a hexagonal casing of rust-colored material. To the discoverers, it bore an uncanny resemblance to a modern spark plug. The immediate and explosive question was, how did a piece of 20th century technology become completely encased in stone that geological analysis suggested was over 500,000 years old? This was the birth of the Coso Artifact mystery, a story that perfectly illustrates the collision between sensational discovery and sober scrutiny. The claim was extraordinary, implying a lost civilization with advanced engineering or even visitors from beyond our world, leaving a piece of their machinery in the distant past. The artifact quickly became a centerpiece for those arguing that our history is fundamentally wrong. Yet, as with all such claims, the devil is in the details, and the details here began to unravel. Skeptics and researchers from mainstream geology and archaeology took a closer look. They proposed a far more mundane yet fascinating explanation. The object, they argued, was indeed a spark plug, likely from a Champion brand model common in the 1920s. The stone surrounding it was not ancient rock at all, but a hard mineral concretion. Concretions form relatively quickly in geological terms when mineral cement precipitates around a nucleus, often a human-made object. A spark plug lost in the dry California desert a century ago could easily become the heart of such a formation, its outer layers hardening into a shell that mimicked the appearance of a much older geode. This explanation did not require rewriting history, only understanding a natural process. The Coso artifact serves a crucial purpose in the study of the out-of-place. It is a powerful cautionary tale about the human desire to see the extraordinary, a desire that can sometimes outpace the evidence. It reminds us that authentication is a meticulous process, and that the most thrilling answer is not always the correct one. Yet, even as a probable modern object, its legacy endures. It remains a staple in discussions of anomalous finds precisely because it encapsulates the entire debate. the initial rush of a world-changing possibility, the gradual application of scientific reasoning, and the enduring public fascination with the idea that our past might be stranger than we think. The real lesson of the Coso artifact may not be about ancient technology, but about our own relationship with mystery and the careful balance we must strike between open-minded wonder and rigorous doubt. A hammer should not be a geological mystery. Its purpose is simple, its form unchanged for millennia. Yet one particular hammer discovered in London, Texas in 1936 refuses to fit neatly into our timeline. According to the story, it was found by a local family out for a walk, protruding from a chunk of Cretaceous rock. This was not just any stone, but a concretion dated by its surrounding strata to be over 100 million years old, a time when dinosaurs, not humans, were the dominant life on Earth. The object itself is hauntingly familiar, a hammerhead of solid iron attached to a wooden handle, but the details are where the normalcy ends. The iron of the head is of an unusual composition, showing remarkably little corrosion despite its alleged age. More startling, the wooden handle is not merely old, it is partially transformed, its organic material turned to stone through the slow process of petrification. To those who champion its authenticity, the London hammer is a thunderclap of evidence. It suggests quite literally that a human toolmaker walked the earth in an age we reserve for towering reptiles. The implications are staggering, pointing to a lost chapter of history or a timeline so fractured it challenges the very foundations of paleontology and archaeology. The scientific counterargument, however, offers a different kind of story, one about the patient and deceptive power of geology. Experts who dispute the hammer's antiquity point to a well-known natural process. The rock encasing the hammer is not a primordial layer of the Earth's crust, but a concretion. Concretions form when mineral cement, often limestone, precipitates from groundwater, hardening around any available object. A hammer lost or discarded in a creek bed a few centuries ago could easily become the nucleus for such a formation. Over time, the soluble minerals would encase it completely, creating a hard shell that mimics solid, ancient stone. The petrified wood handle supports this, as petrification can occur in a matter of centuries under the right mineral-rich conditions, not necessarily eons. The unusual iron alloy could simply be a product of 19th-century metallurgy, its lack of rust a testament to the protective, anoxic environment inside the concretion itself. This is where the London hammer becomes more than an object. It becomes a perfect embodiment of a philosophical clash. It forces a direct confrontation between two ways of seeing evidence. On one side is the literal interpretation of context. The hammer was found in ancient rock, therefore it must be as ancient as the rock. On the other is the interpretation of process. We must understand how the rock formed and whether the object could have been introduced at a later stage. This debate cuts to the very heart of how we establish proof in the deep past. What constitutes definitive evidence? Is it the location of the find, or is it our understanding of the mechanisms that could have put it there? The hammer offers no easy answers, only a persistent question mark. It reminds us that the Earth itself is an active participant in history, capable of creating puzzles that look like miracles. Whether a relic of a forgotten world or a testament to geological sleight of hand, the London hammer holds its secrets tightly, a simple tool at the center of an impossibly complex riddle. Deep in the mountains, a story was born not from a single artifact, but from an entire collection of them, wrapped in a narrative that feels pulled from the pages of science fiction. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-Te is said to have entered a series of caves in the remote Baigong Pipes mountains. What he reportedly found there has fueled one of the most enduring and controversial legends in the annals of the unexplained. Scattered across the cave floor were hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter with a hole in the center, resembling large, ancient phonograph records. Their surfaces were inscribed with a continuous, tiny groove that spiraled from the edge to the center, a groove that under magnification was said to reveal miniature hieroglyphic characters. More unsettling still, the story describes the discovery of skeletal remains nearby, remains of individuals with unusually small stature and large, elongated skulls. The tale, as it was later popularized in the West, claims these discs, dated to an astonishing 12,000 years ago, were the recorded history of the Dropa, a peaceful alien race whose spacecraft crashed in those desolate mountains long ago. The spiraling script allegedly told their sorrowful story of being stranded on an unfamiliar world, unable to repair their craft. This is the potent legend of the Dropa Stones, a story that perfectly illustrates how an archaeological mystery can transform into a full-blown modern myth. The appeal is undeniable, touching on our deepest curiosities about ancient contact and lost civilizations from beyond our world. Yet when we trace this story back to its origins, the solid ground of evidence begins to dissolve. Mainstream archaeology and sinology have largely dismissed the discs. Many scholars identify them as common by discs, ceremonial jade or stone artifacts known from Neolithic Chinese cultures, used in burial practices and representing the heavens. The intricate spiral grooves could be a stylized representation of clouds or celestial patterns, not encoded text. Furthermore, the primary sources for the initial discovery are frustratingly murky. The original Chinese archaeological reports, if they ever existed in the form described, have never been verified or made accessible to the wider academic community. The skeletal remains said to be associated with the discs have never been produced for independent study. The most detailed accounts of the translated text come from sensational books and articles in the 1960s, not from peer-reviewed journals. For most historians, the Dropa narrative is considered a hoax, a layered fabrication that merged a real type of artifact with a wholly invented backstory. But to simply label it a hoax and move on misses the deeper point of why this story captivates us so completely. The enduring power of the Dropa Stones lies not in their physical reality, but in the profound human longing they represent. They speak to a desire for connection across the vastness of space and time, a hope that we are not alone in the universe and that evidence of other visitors is hidden in our own past. The story transforms anonymous Neolithic artisans into interstellar historians and a cave in China into a cosmic crash site. It shows how a genuine artifact, when placed into a narrative vacuum, can become a canvas for our most expansive dreams and fears. The discs themselves may be ordinary, but the legend they inspired is a cultural artifact in its own right, a testament to the stories we choose to tell about who we are and where we might have come from. In the end, the Dropa mystery teaches us a crucial lesson about distinguishing between the artifact and the story built around it. One is a physical object to be studied, the other is a mirror reflecting our own endless fascination with the unknown. Sometimes the most elaborate mysteries are born not from discovery but from creation. In the rolling hills of Ica, Peru, during the 1960s, a farmer named Basilio Ashuya began presenting local doctors and collectors with a seemingly endless supply of ancient-looking stones. These were not ordinary rocks. Each one was meticulously engraved with scenes that defied all conventional history. One stone might show a human figure locked in combat with a triceratops. Another depicted a detailed surgical operation, with a patient undergoing what looked like a heart transplant or a cesarean section. Yet others displayed precise astronomical maps of constellations unknown to modern astronomy. Ashuya claimed he had found them in sealed caves, artifacts from a lost, advanced civilization that walked the Earth alongside dinosaurs. The sheer volume was staggering, eventually numbering in the tens of thousands. The narrative they presented was irresistibly captivating, a complete alternate history etched in andesite. For those yearning for proof of a forgotten world, the Ica Stones appeared to be a library of impossible evidence. The scientific and archaeological community, however, quickly reached a very different conclusion. The engravings showed no signs of the weathering one would expect from stones buried for centuries. The lines were sharp and fresh, the iconography suspiciously modern in style. Under pressure, Basilio Ushuaia eventually admitted the truth. He and other local farmers had carved the stones themselves, using simple tools and then aging them with boot polish and chicken droppings. They were elaborate forgeries crafted explicitly for a growing tourist market eager to buy a piece of the mysterious past. The case seemed closed, a straightforward hoax exposed. But to dismiss them entirely is to miss the deeper layers of this puzzle. The real question the Ica Stones provoke is not about their authenticity, but about the source of their imagery. Where did these rural farmers get the inspiration for such specific and complex scenes? The dinosaurs are rendered with an anatomical detail that, while not perfectly scientific, reflects popular paleontological knowledge of the mid-20th century. The medical procedures mirror contemporary surgical techniques. This suggests the carvers were absorbing ideas from magazines, books, or even local museum visits, then translating them into a faux ancient style. Yet some researchers quietly wonder if there could be a grain of older tradition buried within the fraud. Could some of the motifs, especially the astronomical ones, be drawn from genuine, but now lost, Andean folklore or misinterpretations of actual Paracas or Nazca iconography? The stones, in their own fabricated way, tap into a very real human impulse to explain our origins through story, to merge myth with memory. They are a powerful reminder that the line between an elaborate forgery and a genuine historical mystery is often perilously thin. Both rely on the same human desire to find patterns and meaning in the past. The Ica Stones ultimately teach us a crucial lesson about evidence itself. They show how the passionate desire to believe in a more wondrous history can sometimes outpace our critical judgment, allowing us to see what we wish to see. They stand as a monument not to ancient astronauts or lost worlds, but to the enduring power of a good story and our own vulnerability to the artifacts that seem to promise it. A map should reflect the world as its maker knows it, yet one 16th century chart seems to contain knowledge of a world its maker could not possibly have known. In 1513, Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a detailed world map, drawing from a collection of ancient source charts, some reportedly dating back to the Great Library of Alexandria itself. The map is a beautiful artifact of its age, showing the known coasts of Europe, Africa, and the newly encountered Americas. But it is a small, tantalizing section at the very bottom of the parchment that ignites a firestorm of debate. There, stretching below the Atlantic, is a landmass with a distinct, jagged coastline. To many researchers who have studied its contours, this land bears a startling resemblance to the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica. The problem and the profound mystery is timing. Antarctica as a continent was not officially sighted by European explorers until 1820. Even more baffling, the coastline on the Piri Reis Map is not shown buried under miles of glacial ice, as it has been for at least 12,000 years. It is depicted as a free, open shore. How could a 16th century Ottoman admiral have charted a continent hidden under ice for millennia? The most controversial explanation points to a cataclysm of lost knowledge. Proponents of this view argue that Piri Reis was working from far older source maps, copies of copies that originated with an advanced, seafaring civilization from a remote warm period in Earth's deep past. This civilization, perhaps during the last major interglacial period around 120,000 years ago, would have encountered an ice-free Antarctica and meticulously mapped its true shoreline. These maps, they suggest, were preserved in great libraries like Alexandria and survived through copies, their origins forgotten, until fragments were woven into Piri Reis's masterpiece. This theory challenges not just geography but the entire narrative of human exploration, suggesting a cycle of discovery, loss, and rediscovery stretching back into prehistory. Skeptics offer a more grounded yet equally fascinating interpretation. They propose that the southern landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a composite, speculative drawing. It could represent a distorted version of the southern tip of South America, merged with rumors of a great southern continent that had circulated since ancient times. The accuracy, they argue, is coincidental or overstated, a case of our modern eyes seeing a match where the cartographer intended only guesswork. They point out that the map contains known errors and omissions, showing it is very much a product of its time, not a perfect satellite image from the past. This debate makes the Piri Reis Map more than a historical curiosity. It becomes a lens through which we examine how knowledge endures. If the skeptical view is correct, the map is a testament to human intuition and the power of accumulated rumor. If the more radical interpretation holds a grain of truth, it speaks to a terrifying fragility. It suggests that advanced geographical understanding can be almost completely erased by climate shifts and the collapse of civilizations, surviving only as ghostly traces in later works. The map forces us to confront a haunting possibility that our current age of information is not the first, and that the libraries of the past may have held secrets about our planet that we are only now, piece by fragile piece, beginning to suspect. But a manuscript should be a conversation across time, a voice from the past speaking in a language we can learn. The Voynich Manuscript refuses this basic courtesy. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, this illustrated codex is a book that looks perfectly ordinary from a distance, yet reveals itself as one of the most profound intellectual locks ever created. Its approximately 240 vellum pages are filled from edge to edge with graceful, flowing text in an alphabet that does not match any known writing system on Earth. The characters are elegantly formed, suggesting a real language with patterns and structure, yet they form words and sentences that have resisted every attempt at translation for over a century. It is not written in cipher like a simple substitution code, but in what appears to be a genuine but completely unknown script. This text wins around illustrations that deepen the mystery rather than solve it. There are pages of bizarre, unidentifiable plants, their roots and leaves drawn with precise botanical detail, but belonging to no species a modern botanist can name. There are circular diagrams of celestial bodies with unfamiliar constellations, and intricate networks of tubes and vessels that some interpret as biological or even microscopic systems. One section famously depicts dozens of nude female figures bathing in or connected to strange green, fluid-filled pools, a scene that has fueled endless speculation about alchemical or therapeutic knowledge. The manuscript's journey into the modern era began when a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich purchased it in 1912, giving the puzzle its name. Since then, it has passed through the hands of scholars, collectors, and some of the finest code-breaking minds of the 20th century, including teams from both World War II and the National Security Agency. These experts who cracked the most sophisticated military codes of their day have all been baffled. The text demonstrates statistical properties of a real language, with word lengths and character repetitions that follow logical rules, yet it remains utterly opaque. This persistence is what elevates the Voynich from a curious antique to a monumental artifact of the unknown. The leading theories about its origin pull us in wildly different directions. The hoax hypothesis suggests a clever forger, perhaps even its finder Voynich himself, created an elaborate nonsense book to sell to a wealthy collector. Yet, the consistency and complexity of the text, coupled with its verified early 15th century materials, make a purely random fabrication seem increasingly unlikely to many analysts. The lost language theory proposes it records a genuine, now extinct vernacular or a constructed philosophical language, its knowledge so specialized that all context for it vanished. The most tantalizing idea is that it represents a treatise on a forgotten natural philosophy, a holistic system of understanding the world that blended botany, astronomy, and human biology in a way completely alien to the emerging analytical science of Renaissance Europe. This manuscript does not just challenge our ability to read, it challenges our assumptions about what knowledge looked like in the past. It is a tangible reminder that history is not a clear stream flowing into the present, but a deep ocean where entire continents of thought may have sunk without a trace. The Voynich Manuscript sits in a library at Yale University, completely digitized and available for anyone in the world to study. Its silence is not one of absence, but of a persistent, elegant voice speaking in a tongue we have not yet learned to hear. It stands as the ultimate puzzle, not because it hides a single secret, but because it represents the very edge of our understanding, a quiet monument to all that remains stubbornly and beautifully beyond our grasp. From high above, the desert floor transforms into a vast and cryptic canvas. Etched across nearly 200 square miles of Peru's arid pampas are the Nazca Lines, an immense gallery of geometric shapes, straight lines running for miles, and colossal depictions of animals and plants. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a sprawling monkey with a coiled tail, an orca, a spider, all drawn on a scale so monumental they become coherent images only when viewed from the air. These geoglyphs were created by the Nazca people, who simply moved the dark, sun-baked surface stones to reveal the lighter earth beneath, a process that began around 500 years before the Common Era and continued for a millennium. Their endurance is a testament to the region's unique, rainless climate, yet their purpose remains one of archaeology's most captivating enigmas. Why would a culture invest such tremendous communal effort to create art they could never truly see? The mainstream explanations are deeply rooted in the spiritual world of the Nazca. Many researchers believe the lines served as sacred pathways for ceremonial processions, walked by priests and participants to communicate with deities believed to reside in the mountains and sky. Others see them as a vast astronomical calendar, their alignments pointing to solstice sunrises or important constellations, linking the people to the cycles of the heavens. The animal figures likely represented powerful spiritual symbols or clan totems, offerings to gods controlling water, the most precious resource in that harsh desert. These interpretations paint a picture of a society whose entire landscape was interwoven with ritual meaning, a map of faith written on the earth itself. However, the sheer logistical feat of their creation inevitably sparks more speculative questions. The precision is staggering. Many of the miles-long straight lines deviate by less than a few feet over their entire length, and the animal figures maintain perfect proportionality despite their enormous scale. This accuracy implies sophisticated surveying techniques, perhaps using simple stakes and cords, but executed with a level of planning that feels almost engineering-like. It is this combination of scale and precision that led to a provocative 20th century theory. Could these lines have served as directional markers or even runways for ancient aircraft? The idea suggests that the Nazca, or visitors they might have encountered, possessed the technology for flight, and these glyphs were meant to be seen and used from above. While this theory captures the imagination, it faces a significant logical hurdle. If you possessed aircraft, would you need landing strips dozens of miles long etched into rock, or would you build more practical, compact infrastructure? The runway theory often projects a modern sensibility onto an ancient mindset. Yet, even without ancient astronauts, the lines force a profound appreciation of the Nazca's capabilities. They achieved aerial-scale artistry without an aerial view, likely by scaling up small models using a grid system, a testament to human ingenuity and spatial reasoning. This brings us back to the core mystery, not of how they were built, but why in this form. Perhaps the answer lies in the perspective of the gods themselves. If the deities were believed to dwell in the sky, then creating offerings visible only from that vantage point makes a powerful kind of spiritual sense. The lines were not for human admiration but for divine acknowledgement. They represent a breathtaking act of faith, a civilization literally drawing prayers into the land, hoping to be seen from above. In doing so, they left behind a puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding of what ancient peoples felt compelled to build, and for whom or what they were truly building it. A perfect sphere is one of nature's rarest forms, yet in the jungles of Costa Rica they appear by the hundreds, carved by human hands. Scattered across the Diquis Delta are the enigmatic stone spheres, ranging from the size of a melon to colossal orbs over 6 feet in diameter and weighing up to 16 tons. Their creation began around 600 years after the Common Era and continued until the arrival of Spanish colonizers. Carved from solid gabbro, limestone, or sandstone, their precision is what stops the breath. Many are so perfectly round that modern measurements reveal only the slightest of deviations, a feat of craftsmanship that seems to defy the presumed technology of the time. They were shaped using only stone tools through a patient process of pecking, grinding, and polishing that must have consumed generations of labor. The first question is always how, but the deeper, more haunting question is why. What compelled this society to invest such staggering effort into creating objects of such pure, geometric simplicity? The spheres were not hidden away. They were placed in prominent positions, often arranged in lines or geometric patterns in the plazas of chiefdoms, along pathways, or near important dwellings. This visible placement suggests they served as powerful social symbols. One leading theory posits they were markers of status and authority, with the size and number of spheres a chief possessed directly reflecting his power and lineage. Another compelling idea ties them to the cosmos. Certain alignments of spheres have been found to correspond with astronomical phenomena, such as the rising and setting of the sun during solstices, suggesting they functioned as a kind of permanent stone calendar anchoring the community to celestial cycles. Yet, like so many artifacts of lost cultures, their true cultural meaning died with the people who made them. The Spanish conquest and the subsequent disruption of indigenous societies severed the living thread of knowledge. The spheres were left behind, silent and heavy with a significance we can only guess at. Their mystery is amplified by the practical challenge of their movement. How were these multi-ton stone balls transported from quarry to site through dense jungle and across rivers without the wheel or draft animals? The likely answer is a testament to human ingenuity and communal effort, using log rollers, rope, and coordinated labor on a massive scale. This very practicality, however, circles back to the central theme. The immense investment of time and energy signifies that these were not mere decorations. They held a value so profound to their creators that it justified the work of centuries. Today, they stand as serene, polished puzzles. They do not shout their purpose like a temple or a tomb. They simply exist, embodiments of a lost language of stone, reminding us that the greatest mysteries are often not about advanced technology, but about the profound and inscrutable meanings ancient peoples poured into the world around them. A single coin can carry the weight of an entire continent. In 1957, at a Native American coastal settlement in Maine known as the Goddard Site, archaeologists sifting through layers of history uncovered a small, corroded silver disc. When cleaned and identified, it revealed itself as something profoundly out of place. A Norwegian penny minted during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, who ruled between 1067 and 1093 years after the Common Era. This was not just any old coin, it was a direct artifact from the Viking Age, found not in Scandinavia or even in their known settlement at El Ants-Aux Meadows in Newfoundland, but over 1,000 miles farther south, buried in the soil of a pre-Columbian Wabanaki site. The immediate and thrilling question was obvious. Did a Norse explorer, a Viking traveler, drop this coin himself on the shores of Maine centuries before Columbus sailed? The possibility is electric, suggesting the Norse ventured much farther down the North American coast than our established history records. It paints a picture of a chance encounter, a trade, or perhaps a loss that could rewrite the map of early transatlantic contact. Yet archaeology rarely deals in simple, thrilling answers. The majority of scholars point to a different, equally fascinating story. They highlight the vast and sophisticated trade networks that interconnected indigenous peoples across North America for millennia. Goods like copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains traveled incredible distances through these networks. The Maine Penny, they argue, is far more likely to have journeyed south through these intricate channels of exchange over many generations. A Norse object left in Newfoundland could have been picked up, valued for its exotic material or curious markings, and traded hand to hand, moving slowly down the coast until it finally came to rest in Maine. This explanation does not diminish the coin's significance, it transforms it. Instead of proof of a Norse voyage, it becomes evidence of something else entirely: the incredible reach and complexity of Native American economies. It shows how an object from one world could be absorbed into the cultural and economic fabric of another, traveling farther than its original owners ever did. The Maine Penny, therefore, sits at a perfect crossroads of interpretation. It is a tangible link between two proven facts: the Norse presence in Newfoundland and the dynamic indigenous trade spanning the continent. Its very existence challenges any simplistic narrative of isolated cultures. It forces us to see the pre-Columbian world not as a collection of separate islands of humanity, but as a living, breathing web of connection, where an artifact from a Norse king could find a final resting place in a Wabanaki shell midden. The coin's power lies in its ambiguity. It does not shout a definitive truth, but whispers a compelling set of possibilities, each one revealing a different layer of our interconnected past. Aluminum is a metal of the modern world, a symbol of industrial age innovation. But in 1974, on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania, workers digging a trench made a discovery that seemed to turn that timeline to dust. Buried under 35 feet of sand and clay, alongside the massive bones of a mastodon, they uncovered a strange, wedge-shaped object. It was heavy for its size, and its surface was pitted with deep oxidation channels. Initial tests revealed its shocking composition. It was made primarily of aluminum, alloyed with other trace metals. This was the Aiud Wedge, and its reported context placed it alongside remains from the Pleistocene epoch, suggesting an age of at least 11,000 years, possibly far older. The immediate contradiction was absolute. While aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in pure form in nature. It bonds tightly with other elements, and extracting it requires a complex electrochemical process not developed until the 1820s. The idea of a refined aluminum alloy existing in the era of woolly mammoths and early human hunters was on its face an impossibility. It sparked immediate and sensational theories. Was this a fragment of a prehistoric tool, evidence of a lost civilization with knowledge of advanced metallurgy? Could it even be a piece of something more exotic, like a landing gear from an ancient, unfamiliar craft? The artifact seemed to be a perfect physical paradox, yet, as with so many of these cases, the initial story began to unravel under closer scrutiny. The central pillar of the mystery was its supposed geological context, the claim that it was found in the same undisturbed layer as mastodon bones was the key to its ancient dating. However, this provenance proved difficult to verify with scientific rigor. The object was not excavated by archaeologists under controlled conditions, but by construction workers. The precise stratigraphy, the layered record of the Earth at the site, could not be definitively established after the fact. Without that airtight context, the artifact's age became a question mark. Later, more detailed metallurgical analysis offered a mundane but plausible explanation. The alloy composition, while unusual, was consistent with certain 20th century industrial materials, specifically parts used in heavy mining or excavating machinery. The deep pitting on its surface, initially thought to be extreme age, could also be explained by corrosion from long-term exposure to river sediments and salts. The most likely scenario, according to skeptical researchers, is that the wedge is a modern piece of industrial equipment, perhaps a tooth from an excavator bucket or a drill bit, that was lost or discarded and over time became buried in the riverbank, eventually settling near much older fossil remains. This coincidence of location, rather than a connection in time, created the illusion of an impossible artifact. The story of the Aiud Wedge is therefore a masterclass in a different kind of historical mystery. Its greatest lesson is not about ancient technology, but about the scientific process itself. It underscores the paramount importance of provenance, the verified and documented history of an object from the moment it is found. An artifact without clear context is like a quote without a source. It can be made to mean almost anything. The wedge also highlights the powerful allure of the initial, sensational interpretation. The human mind is drawn to the extraordinary, to the world-shattering possibility. It is far more thrilling to imagine a prehistoric aluminum smelter than a lost excavator part. This case reminds us that separating the signal of genuine mystery from the noise of coincidence and misinterpretation requires patience, skepticism, and a relentless focus on verifiable evidence. The Aiud Wedge may not rewrite history, but it perfectly illustrates the delicate and often dramatic journey from a startling discovery to a sober understanding. A stone can be a vessel for a story, a claim carved directly into its surface. In a field near Kensington, Minnesota, in 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing land when he discovered a large, flat slab of greywacke stone tangled in the roots of an aspen tree. The stone itself was unremarkable, but the inscription covering its face was anything but. It was carved with runes, the angular alphabet of the Norse, telling a tale of exploration and hardship. The text, dated 1362, described a party of 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on a journey from Vinland far to the west. It spoke of a tragic day where 10 men were left red with blood, killed, a grim detail that gave the narrative a startling immediacy. This was the Kensington Runestone, and its message was a historical thunderbolt. If genuine, it meant Norse explorers had not only reached North America centuries before Columbus, but had ventured deep into the continent's interior, into the very heart of what would become the United States, a full 130 years after the Viking settlement at Elland's Ox Meadows was abandoned. The implications would dramatically expand the map of pre-Columbian contact. The stone ignited fierce debate from the moment it was revealed. For many, particularly in Scandinavian immigrant communities, it was a point of immense pride, a tangible link to their heritage that rooted them in the ancient soil of their new home. It seemed to validate a deeper, older connection to the American landscape. Scholars of runology and medieval Scandinavian language, however, soon raised serious objections. They pointed to linguistic anomalies in the inscription, runic forms, and grammatical constructions that did not align perfectly with 14th century usage, but seemed more consistent with 19th century understandings of Old Norse. The story itself, with its specific date and dramatic narrative, felt oddly tailored for a modern audience expecting a saga. the most widely accepted academic view is that the stone is a clever, heartfelt hoax, likely created by Olaf Oman himself or someone in his community. The motive was probably not malicious fraud, but a cultural creation, a piece of folk art that gave physical form to the immigrant desire to belong, to inscribe their own ancient story onto the new land. This interpretation does not diminish the stone's significance, it transforms it. The Kensington Runestone, whether a medieval record or a 19th century creation, is undeniably a real artifact of human longing. It embodies the powerful urge to find oneself in history, to bridge the gap between an old world and a new one. Its enduring controversy highlights the eternal struggle in the study of the past, the difficult work of separating the evidence we wish for from the evidence that stands up to rigorous scrutiny. The stone remains on display, a heavy, silent question mark. It asks us not only who carved it and when, but why we are so deeply compelled to find such messages from the past, and how carefully we must listen to what they are truly trying to say. Deep within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, the stone walls tell stories in carved relief. Among the scenes of gods and rituals, one set of images stands out with a startlingly modern appearance. They show human figures kneeling beside large, elongated objects that look like giant glass bulbs. Inside each bulb winds a snake, its body held aloft by a series of supporting arms, and the entire assembly is connected by a cable to a box, which is then held by a kneeling god atop a pillar. To a viewer from the 21st century, the resemblance is immediate and electrifying. It looks for all the world like an ancient diagram of an electric light bulb, with the snake as the glowing filament, the bulb as the glass enclosure, and the box as a power source or battery. This interpretation, popularized in alternative history circles, suggests the ancient Egyptians might have possessed and ritualized a form of electrical illumination, perhaps even using something akin to a Crookes tube, an early type of electrical light. The implications are as bright as the imagined bulb itself, pointing to a hidden thread of technological knowledge woven into their sacred art. Egyptologists, however, illuminate a very different meaning, one drawn from the rich tapestry of Egyptian mythology and symbolism. They identify the central object not as a bulb, but as a lotus flower, a potent symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake emerging from it is not a filament, but a representation of the primordial serpent god, often associated with the sun god Ra, emerging from the watery chaos of creation. The entire scene is a complex cosmological diagram. The pillar is a jed pillar, symbolizing stability, and the box is likely a shrine. The connected elements illustrate the Egyptian understanding of the divine life force, the energy that animates the cosmos, flowing from the gods into the world. In this view, the carving is not a technical schematic, but a spiritual one, depicting the moment of creation and the sustaining power of the gods. This stark clash of interpretations makes the Dendera relief a perfect case study in how we see the past. One perspective looks at the carving and sees a literal, functional technology, projecting our modern understanding of electricity onto the shapes. The other listens to the cultural and religious context of the people who made it, hearing a story about cosmic snakes and flowering lotuses. This is not merely a debate about one carving, it is about the fundamental challenge of historical interpretation. How do we avoid dressing ancient people in the clothes of our own time? The desire to see advanced technology in every unusual artifact speaks to a deep human curiosity, a hope that our ancestors were more like us, or even more advanced than we believe. Yet it risks silencing their actual voice, their own unique way of explaining the universe through myth and symbol. The truth of Dendera likely lies not in hidden generators, but in something equally profound. It shows a civilization that conceptualized invisible cosmic energy, depicted it with striking visual metaphors, and integrated that understanding into the very architecture of their faith. They may not have had electric lights, but they certainly sought to illustrate the light of creation itself, carved in stone for eternity. Gold can capture more than just light. It can capture a form that feels startlingly familiar. Crafted by the Quimbaya civilization of Colombia around 1,000 years after the Common Era, these small, intricate artifacts are officially classified as zoomorphic figurines, representing stylized birds, insects, or other animals. They are beautiful examples of pre-Columbian metallurgy, objects of ritual and status. Yet, when you hold one in your hand, or see it photographed against a plain background, a strange cognitive shift occurs. The smooth, aerodynamic body, the sharply swept back wings, the distinct vertical tail stabilizer, all seem to leap out of an ancient context and into a modern one. To an eye trained by the 20th century, the silhouette is unmistakable. It looks for all the world like a model of a jet aircraft or a delta-winged space shuttle. This visual echo is so powerful it has spawned a compelling, if controversial, hypothesis. Could these objects be evidence of lost technological knowledge, or even ancient contact with advanced visitors? Proponents point to aerodynamic tests, where scale models of the artifacts have been shown to glide surprisingly well when launched, suggesting their forms are not merely decorative but functionally sound. The implication is tantalizing that the Quimbaya might have been modeling something they had witnessed, a concept of flight far beyond the natural flutter of a bird. However, archaeology urges a different, more grounded perspective. The key lies in understanding the artistic tradition from which these objects sprang. The Quimbaya were master goldsmiths whose work consistently drew from their natural environment. Their art is filled with stylized representations of frogs, bats, lizards, and birds, often abstracted to their most elegant and essential forms. What we perceive as jet-like features, the swept wings and stabilizer, can be perfectly explained as an artist's simplification of a bird in motion, capturing the dynamic sweep of a wing in flight or the sharp angle of a tail feather for balance. The fact that these shapes prove aerodynamically stable is less a revelation of engineering intent and more a happy accident of mimicking nature, which has spent eons perfecting aerodynamic forms. This is where the Quimbaya artifacts become a profound lesson in perception itself. They demonstrate with brilliant clarity how our own contemporary frame of reference acts as a powerful filter. We live in an age of aviation, surrounded by images of aircraft and spacecraft. When we encounter an ancient object with certain geometric qualities, our minds naturally, almost irresistibly, map that familiar silhouette onto it. We are not seeing what the Quimbaya artisan saw, we are seeing our own world reflected in their work. This is not a failure, but a fascinating feature of how we interact with history. These golden objects sit at the crossroads of two truths. In their own time, they were almost certainly sacred or prestigious items, embodiments of animal spirits or symbols of power. In our time, they have become mirrors, reflecting our technological age and our deep-seated curiosity about the possibilities of the past. Their true value may lie not in proving the existence of pre-Columbian jets, but in revealing how the mysteries we find are often shaped by the questions we bring. They challenge us to look past our own assumptions, to see the ancient artist's hand striving to capture the essence of their own world. A world where the most advanced technology was not metal and jet fuel, but fire, skill, and a profound understanding of the creatures sharing their lush Columbian landscape. A cube of iron should not be a philosophical problem. Discovered in 1885 by a miner working a tertiary coal seam in Wolfsegg, Austria, this small, heavy object was nearly a perfect cube, its surfaces smoothed as if by time or design. The coal bed itself was ancient, dating to a period millions of years before modern humans walked the earth. the immediate implication was as shocking as it was simple. Here was a worked metal object buried in strata from an age when no intelligent life, according to all scientific understanding, should have existed to shape it. Dubbed the Wolf's Egg Iron or the Salzburg Cube, it was quickly proposed as a sensational out-of-place artifact, a literal anachronism forged in deep time. The initial scientific examination offered a potential escape from this paradox. Analysis showed a high nickel content, a signature often associated with meteoric iron. Perhaps it was a natural metallic meteorite that had somehow been tumbled into a cubical shape by geological forces, a cosmic coincidence that only looked manufactured. This explanation allowed the cube to be catalogued as a curiosity, a natural oddity, and for a time the mystery seemed resolved. Yet the doubts never fully disappeared, primarily because the story of its discovery was built on such fragile foundations. The cube was not excavated under scientific observation. Its exact position within the coal seam, the crucial context that would prove it was truly embedded and not a later intrusion, was never properly documented by geologists of the era. The early days of archaeology and geology were filled with such haphazard finds, where the thrill of the object often outpaced the meticulous recording of its setting. This lack of provenance of a verified chain of custody from the earth to the museum drawer is the cube's true legacy. It transforms the object from a clear challenge into a permanent question mark. Without that documented context, we are left with two equally plausible but opposing narratives. One tells of a miner's discovery that could upend our timeline, a metal cube from the age of giant ferns. The other tells of a more mundane possibility, that the cube, whether a meteorite or even a piece of industrial debris, simply fell or was dropped into a fissure in the coal at a much later date, becoming lodged in a way that made it appear ancient to its finder. The Wolf's Egg Iron, therefore, serves a purpose far greater than being a potential OOP art. It stands as a monument to the methodology of history itself. It reminds us that an artifact alone is not enough. Its power as evidence is granted or stripped away by the story of its finding. This small, silent cube teaches a critical lesson to anyone captivated by historical mysteries. The most important part of any discovery often happens not in the laboratory analysis, but in the careful, unglamorous work of documenting the exact moment it emerges from the ground. In that missing documentation lies the difference between a revolution and a rumor, a fact and a fascinating story we may never be able to fully prove. A terracotta head can carry the features of a world away. Deep within a burial at Calixtlahuaca, Mexico, archaeologists uncovered a small, sculpted head that seemed utterly foreign to its surroundings. With its curly hair, full beard, and classical facial structure, it bore the unmistakable stylistic hallmarks of Roman art from the 2nd or 3rd century after the Common Era. The context, however, was firmly pre-Columbian, found in a layer dated to sometime between the 12th and 15th centuries, long before any documented European contact with the Americas. This was the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and its discovery presented a miniature, three-dimensional riddle. How could a Roman artifact find its way into an ancient Mesoamerican grave? The immediate and thrilling possibility is one of accidental voyage. It suggests a lone Roman ship, perhaps blown hopelessly off course by Atlantic storms, might have made a landing on the shores of the New World. A single survivor or a small group could have carried this object with them, and through trade or gift, it eventually traveled inland, becoming a curious heirloom before being laid to rest with its final owner. This narrative speaks to the romance of the lone explorer and the tantalizing idea of random, fleeting connections across the vast ocean. It challenges the strict model of completely isolated hemispheric development, proposing that while civilizations grew independently, the threads of chance might have brushed against each other on rare, undocumented occasions. The academic consensus, however, leans toward more grounded explanations. the primary suspicion is one of stratigraphic intrusion. The head was found not in a sealed, pristine tomb, but in a fill layer that could have been disturbed. It is possible, though not proven, that the artifact was introduced much later, perhaps during the colonial era or even by modern activity, and settled into a position that made it appear ancient. Without airtight, undisturbed context, the head's provenance remains uncertain. Another possibility is an elaborate hoax, though no clear evidence points to one. The head's true story likely lies not in rewriting history, but in illustrating the immense difficulty of interpreting a single, anomalous find. It represents the ultimate challenge of archaeology, distinguishing a genuine signal from the noise of coincidence, contamination, and our own powerful desire for connection. Even if it is a post-colonial object, its power as a symbol endures. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. The oceans were not absolute barriers, and the currents could carry a vessel almost anywhere given enough time and misfortune. While a single terracotta head is not enough to prove sustained contact, it keeps alive a profound question about the nature of exploration itself. Could the great, silent expanse of the Atlantic have been crossed by accident, leaving only the faintest, most debatable trace? The head offers no definitive answer, only its silent, classical gaze, reminding us that history is not just the story we can prove, but also the haunting echo of all the stories that might have been lost forever to the sea and the soil. A mountain in China holds a mystery of rust and stone. In a remote region of Qinghai Province, near a natural formation some call Mount Baigong, reports emerged of strange, tubular structures emerging from the rock itself. These are the Baigong Pipes, a collection of rust-colored, hollow tubes of various diameters, some as wide as a foot across, others as narrow as a toothpick, all seemingly embedded deep within the mountain's fabric. Their appearance is startling, a network of metallic-looking conduits that feel unnervingly systematic, as if part of some vast, buried machinery from a forgotten age. Initial speculation, fueled by the site's remoteness and the pipe's uniform appearance, suggested dates ranging from ancient to impossibly prehistoric, pointing to the handiwork of an unknown, advanced culture. The most imaginative theories envisioned them as part of a colossal, ancient power plant or an intricate plumbing system for a civilization lost to time. The visual evidence is compelling, a landscape that seems to whisper of intentional design. Yet, geology offers a different, equally fascinating narrative. When scientists examined the pipes, they found them to be composed primarily of iron oxide and silica. This composition is a major clue. Geologists propose that these are not manufactured pipes at all, but extraordinary natural formations known as iron oxide concretions or, in some cases, fossilized tree root casts. Here is how this natural magic works. In ancient, swampy environments, tree roots can create hollow spaces in the sediment as they decay. Over millions of years, mineral-rich groundwater, heavily laden with iron and other elements, can seep into these hollow spaces. The minerals slowly precipitate out of the water, coating the interior of the root cavity and eventually filling it, creating a perfect tube-shaped cast of the original organic structure. The result is a hollow, metallic-looking tube that follows the exact, branching path of the prehistoric root system. Their seemingly regular placement and varied sizes are not evidence of engineering, but a perfect mimicry of nature's own architecture, a fossilized snapshot of an ancient forest's hidden foundation. The Baigong Pipes, therefore, stand at a profound crossroads of perception. They are a masterclass in how our pattern-seeking minds interact with the natural world. In a remote and dramatic landscape, faced with an object that so closely resembles something human-made, the leap to artificiality is almost instinctive. We see pipes because we know what pipes are for. We see a system because we build systems. This is the powerful allure of the out-of-place artifact. the desire to find our own reflection in the deep past. Yet, the geological explanation does not diminish the wonder, it redirects it. Instead of evidence for a lost civilization, the pipes become a testament to the patient, sculpting hand of geological time, capable of creating perfect metallic tubes through nothing more than slow chemistry and the ghostly impression of life that vanished eons ago. They remind us that nature is the ultimate artisan, and sometimes its most breathtaking creations are the ones that so perfectly, so teasingly, resemble our own. The desire to find life beyond our world can transform a simple stone into a universe of possibility. In 2013, a team of researchers announced an extraordinary claim linked to a meteorite that fell near the village of Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka. They reported that within the meteorite structure, under high-powered microscopes, they had discovered something astonishing: microscopic, fossilized forms that closely resembled diatoms, a type of algae commonly found on Earth. The implication was as profound as it was simple. This, they argued, was direct physical evidence for panspermia, the theory that life, or its building blocks, can travel between planets aboard celestial objects like comets and asteroids. For a moment, it seemed a humble space rock had delivered the ultimate message that we are not alone and that life itself might be a cosmic traveler. The initial report sent waves of excitement through communities fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial biology. Here was what appeared to be a classic out-of-place artifact, but on a microscopic and literally universal scale, a biological signature embedded in a visitor from the void. The narrative was compelling, a tiny fossil suggesting that the seeds of life are sown across the galaxy, and that Earth's first organisms might have arrived ready-made on a similar ancient rock. It framed the meteorite not as a piece of debris, but as a life-bearing vessel. However, the scientific community responded with intense scrutiny, and the story began to shift under the weight of rigorous analysis. The central criticism focused on a fundamental principle in meteoritics, the study of meteorites, the problem of terrestrial contamination. A meteorite, after surviving its fiery descent through the atmosphere, becomes a magnet for earthly material. It lands in soil, water, or vegetation, and microscopic organisms and particles can quickly adhere to its porous surface or infiltrate its cracks. The primary counter-argument was that the diatom-like structures were not passengers from space, but hitchhikers from Sri Lanka. They were earthly fossils that had become embedded in the meteorite after its fall, a case of the rock collecting local biology rather than delivering it. Further examination raised additional red flags about the meteorite's classification and the conditions of its recovery. This case, the Sri Lanka meteorite fossils, serves as a crucial modern chapter in the long story of anomalous claims. It highlights the immense burden of proof required when making an extraordinary assertion. The standard, often summarized as extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, demands not just a curious finding, but a bulletproof chain of custody, impeccable laboratory controls, and the rigorous exclusion of all mundane explanations. Here, the mundane explanation, terrestrial contamination, was not only possible but, to most experts, overwhelmingly likely. The episode shows how the powerful human desire to answer the grandest question, "Are we alone?" can sometimes outpace the slow, meticulous, and often unglamorous work of verification. It demonstrates that the spirit of the out-of-place artifact is alive and well in contemporary science, where a discovery can momentarily appear to shatter paradigms before closer inspection reveals a more ordinary, yet still instructive, truth. Ultimately, the meteorite's legacy is not about proving panspermia, but about illustrating the very process of discovery itself. It reminds us that the path to profound truth is paved not just with wonder, but with patience, skepticism, and an unwavering commitment to distinguishing the signal of the cosmos from the persistent, whispering noise of our own world. A carved stone can hold the blueprint of life itself. Among the most controversial artifacts ever presented is the genetic disc, a circular piece of dark lyddite stone, roughly the size of a large coaster, said to originate from pre-Columbian Colombia. Its surface is not decorated with gods or animals, but with a series of precise biological diagrams. One section clearly shows a sperm cell, its distinct head and tail unmistakable. Another depicts a fertilized ovum. Yet another illustrates a fetus in various stages of development, curled within the womb. The sequence is a visual textbook of human conception and gestation, a level of biological understanding that was not concretely visualized by Western science until the invention of the microscope in the 17th century. The immediate implication is as profound as it is unsettling. If this artifact is genuinely ancient, it suggests that a lost culture possessed knowledge of microscopic biology millennia ahead of its time, observing a reality invisible to the naked eye. This would not be an out-of-place tool or material, but an out-of-place idea, a conceptual leap that defies our entire narrative of scientific progress. The disc seems to whisper of a forgotten school of natural philosophers who saw deeper into the fabric of life than anyone believed possible. Yet the artifact exists in a storm of doubt. From the moment it entered private collections, its provenance has been shadowy. There is no documented archaeological excavation, no chain of custody linking it to a specific dig site or cultural layer. For the vast majority of mainstream archaeologists and historians, this lack of verifiable context is fatal. They classify the disc as an almost certainly modern creation, a clever and detailed forgery crafted to appeal to the fascination with ancient mysteries. The biological accuracy, they argue, is not evidence of ancient knowledge, but proof of modern knowledge being projected onto a fake antiquity. A skilled carver with access to a 20th century biology textbook could have produced these images. This debate places the genetic disc at the most extreme frontier of these discussions. It forces a binary, almost philosophical choice. On one side is the acceptance of a historical and scientific impossibility, a rewrite of biology's timeline so radical it challenges the core of how we understand knowledge itself. On the other is the dismissal of the object as a hoax, a testament to human ingenuity in fabrication rather than in ancient discovery. There is very little comfortable middle ground. This stark either-or scenario makes the disc a powerful symbol, regardless of its truth. It represents the ultimate test of evidence and belief. What would it take for us to accept that our ancestors saw what we needed lenses to see? The burden of proof for such a claim is astronomically high, and the disc, shrouded in questionable origins, simply does not meet it for the scientific community. Yet its haunting imagery lingers. It asks us to consider not just the artifact, but the nature of proof itself. How do we authenticate a revolutionary idea when it is carved in stone? The genetic disc may ultimately be a masterful fake, but its enduring power lies in the sheer audacity of its claim, holding up a dark mirror to our own assumptions about the past and the lonely, fragile path of human understanding. The stones of Mohenjo-Daro tell a story of intense and sudden heat. This grand city of the ancient Indus Valley, a marvel of early urban planning with its advanced drainage and orderly streets, reveals a puzzling layer in its archaeological record. In certain areas, sections of brick and pottery show signs of having been exposed to temperatures so extreme they partially melted, a process known as vitrification. The material fused and glassified as if subjected to a blast furnace. To a mid-20th century observer, freshly aware of the terrifying power of atomic weapons, this evidence suggested something shocking. Could this vitrification be the scar of an ancient nuclear explosion, a cataclysm from a forgotten war between advanced civilizations or even extraterrestrial visitors? The theory wove the physical evidence into a narrative of lost superweapons and apocalyptic conflict, a story that resonated deeply with the pervasive anxieties of the Cold War era. It transformed an archaeological site into a cautionary tale from prehistory, a warning etched in stone and glass. The scientific explanation, however, pulls the story back to a more human, if still dramatic, scale. Archaeologists who have studied the site extensively point to more grounded causes. The vitrified material is not widespread across the entire city, but concentrated in specific locations. This pattern suggests intense, localized fires, not a single, city-wide thermal pulse. One leading theory proposes that during the long, complex decline of Mohenjo-Daro, large-scale deliberate burning may have occurred, perhaps during conflict or as a method of demolition. Another points to the possibility of ancient industrial activity, such as clusters of pottery kilns that burned at very high temperatures for prolonged periods, eventually affecting the surrounding bricks and soil. Over centuries, the accumulated ash and extreme heat from such ordinary human industry could create those isolated pockets of melted material. The enduring power of the nuclear war myth is not in its scientific merit, but in what it reveals about us. It demonstrates how easily observable evidence can be lifted from its original context and stitched into a new story that speaks to contemporary fears and fantasies. The stones of Mohenjo-Daro did not record a nuclear blast, but they became a canvas upon which a modern anxiety about total annihilation was projected. This is a recurring theme in the world of out-of-place artifacts, where the artifact itself is often less mysterious than the grand narrative we build around it. The data is real, the vitrification is real, but the leap to ancient atomic warfare says more about the 20th century mind than it does about the Indus Valley civilization. It shows how these theories often evolve not from pure fiction, but from a potent mix of misunderstood scientific data and the deep human need to find epic, world-altering explanations for the silent marks left by the past. The seafloor holds landscapes that seem to defy the very definition of nature. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, a diver in 1986 encountered a sight that would ignite a debate spanning decades. Looming from the deep blue, some 80 feet below the surface, is a colossal structure of monolithic sandstone. Its sheer walls drop vertically to the seabed. Its surfaces are unnervingly flat, intersecting at crisp 90-degree angles. There are what look like wide terraces, perfect steps, and symmetrical platforms, all carved from the living rock. This is the Yonaguni Monument, a sprawling underwater complex that forces a single, haunting question upon everyone who sees it. Are we looking at a masterpiece of geology or the ruins of a forgotten human world? The formation is immense, stretching over 300 feet long and 150 feet wide, a true underwater mountain of stone. Its most iconic feature is a massive, tiered platform that rises like a grand staircase, each step roughly 3 feet high. Nearby, two tall, pillar-like rocks stand parallel to each other, and a long, straight channel cuts through the formation with a precision that feels deliberate. To the human eye, trained to recognize intention, the entire site whispers of architecture. It feels like a sunken plaza, a ceremonial center, or a fortress reclaimed by the ocean. The most passionate proponents of its artificial origin, led by marine geologist Masaki Kimura, point to these specific features. They note the sharp, clean edges that are rare in natural sandstone erosion, the presence of what appear to be carved reliefs resembling animal forms, and the collection of smaller stones that look like they were placed, not dropped. Kimura has proposed that the monument is the remnant of a city from a pre-glacial civilization, a culture that thrived on a land bridge later swallowed by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age over 10,000 years ago. If true, it would be evidence of a sophisticated society existing at a time when mainstream archaeology tells us humans were only just beginning to settle into agricultural life. Yet the ocean is a patient and powerful sculptor. The skeptical view, championed by geologists like Robert Schoch, argues that the monument is a spectacular but entirely natural formation. Yonaguni sits in a seismically active zone. The sandstone there is heavily fractured along natural planes of weakness. Over millennia, powerful tidal currents have persistently scoured and eroded these fractures, exploiting the stone's layered composition. This process, known as cross-bedding erosion, can create remarkably flat surfaces and sharp angles as softer layers wear away faster than harder ones. The apparent steps could be the result of this differential erosion, and the straight channel could follow a major tectonic fault line. The pillars might simply be harder stone that resisted the wearing force of the water. From this perspective, the monument is a breathtaking example of what geologists call a mega-monocline, a single, massive block of stone shaped by entirely impersonal physical forces. This is where the Yonaguni Monument becomes more than a debate. It becomes a philosophical frontier. It represents the ultimate challenge of underwater archaeology, where the evidence is shrouded in murky light and draped in marine life. The line between a natural wonder and a human artifact is not just blurred, it is submerged. Our tools for distinction, developed on dry land, struggle in this silent realm. The currents that may have carved the stone also scatter any potential small artifacts that could prove human habitation. The site offers no pottery shards, no tools, no hearths, only the overwhelming, ambiguous shape of the stone itself. This profound ambiguity is its greatest gift to our imagination. It forces us to hold two competing truths in our minds at once. We can acknowledge the powerful geological explanations while still feeling the visceral pull of its artificial appearance. The monument invites us to reconsider a deep human story, the legend of a great flood found in cultures across the globe. Could such myths be distant, fragmented memories of coastlines drowning, of communities displaced by rising waters at the end of the Ice Age? Whether a natural marvel or a sunken city, Yonaguni stands as a solemn, aqueous sentinel. It guards the possibility that some of humanity's earliest chapters are not buried in dust, but lost beneath the waves, waiting for our eyes to learn how to truly see. 25 mysteries now lie before us, each a separate piece from a puzzle we are still assembling. When we step back from the individual artifacts, patterns begin to emerge from the noise. These objects, for all their diversity, tend to cluster around a handful of powerful ideas. Some seem to scream of lost technologies, of sophisticated knowledge that appears, shines briefly, and then vanishes from the record. Others whisper of ancient journeys, of transoceanic contact that hints our ancestors were more connected than we dared believe. A third group reminds us of the ever-present risk of misinterpretation, where our modern eyes project meaning onto ancient symbolism, seeing light bulbs where there were lotus flowers. And a final, sobering category stands as testament to human creativity of a different kind, the deliberate hoax born from profit, pride, or a profound desire to belong. To make sense of these patterns, we naturally reach for explanatory frameworks, stories big enough to contain them. One of the most enduring is the forgotten civilization hypothesis. This idea suggests that long before our recorded history, a sophisticated culture achieved a level of technological or scientific understanding, only to be erased by a great cataclysm, a planetary reset button. The survivors, scattered and struggling, would have carried only fragments of that knowledge into the new age, fragments that became the seeds of myth and the blueprints for artifacts that feel impossibly advanced. This framework is deeply appealing, for it explains the sudden appearance and disappearance of complex ideas, like the engineering of the Antikythera Mechanism, while preserving a linear, if interrupted, path of human progress. A more speculative framework looks not to a lost human civilization, but to guidance from beyond our world. The ancient astronaut theory proposes that many of these artifacts, and indeed many ancient marvels, were inspired or directly created with the assistance of extraterrestrial visitors. In this view, the Nazca Lines become landing strips, the Dendera relief becomes a technical diagram, and the genetic disk becomes delivered knowledge. This framework satisfies a deep human curiosity about our origins and our place in the cosmos, transforming puzzling artifacts into physical evidence of a grand interstellar connection. However, it also carries a significant evidential demand, requiring proof not just of advanced capability, but of a non-human source. Then there is the more conservative, yet profoundly humbling, model we might call the gap in our knowledge. This framework accepts the standard archaeological timeline as largely correct but acknowledges vast, silent voids within it. It suggests that these artifacts are not evidence of world-shaking cataclysms or alien tutors, but simply anomalies that highlight the incompleteness of our story. They are reminders of paths not taken, of isolated genius, of cultural innovations that rose and fell without leaving a wider mark. The Baghdad Battery might represent a solitary experiment that never spread. The Quimbaya airplanes could be stunning artistic abstraction, not aeronautical engineering. This model asks not for a new history, but for a more nuanced, less arrogant reading of the one we have, one that admits how much has been lost to time, conflict, and the simple decay of materials and memory. Each framework, from the cataclysmic to the cosmic to the conservative, is a lens, and the lens we choose determines what we see. It shapes whether we view an artifact as a revolutionary relic, a divine gift, or a fascinating dead end. The true pattern that emerges from surveying all 25 cases may be more fundamental than any single theory. It is the pattern of human experience itself, a story not of steady, predictable ascent, but of fits and starts, of brilliant flashes in the dark, of connections made and broken, of knowledge gained, forgotten, and sometimes rediscovered centuries later by an entirely different people. Our history is not a straight line, it is a vast, tangled web, and these artifacts are the stubborn knots in that web, points where the threads of our past twist into shapes we do not yet fully understand. They are not errors in the data, they are the data, challenging us to weave a narrative complex enough and humble enough to finally include them. From the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the submerged platforms of Yonaguni, these 25 out-of-place artifacts form a chorus of quiet, persistent questions against the steady monologue of conventional history. They do not offer us a single, unified answer. Instead, they insist we keep asking better, more nuanced questions about the path we think humanity walked. Whether each one is ultimately evidence of astonishing human ingenuity, fleeting intercultural exchange, the patient artistry of natural phenomena, or the powerful pull of modern myth-making, they all share a common purpose. They challenge us to remain humble about the supposed completeness of our past. The greatest danger in studying history is not a lack of information, but the illusion that we have it all figured out. These artifacts are the antidote to that illusion. They are the cracks of light under a closed door, reminding us that the room of the past is far larger and more strangely furnished than our current maps suggest. As we close this exploration, hold onto that feeling of curiosity, not certainty. History is not a closed book written in stone. It is a living, breathing dialogue, an ongoing conversation between the objects we pull from the earth and the stories we have always told about ourselves. Every shard of pottery, every line on a map, every inexplicable gear is a voice in that conversation, and we must learn to listen, even when the voice speaks in a language we do not yet understand. If this journey has sparked a deeper curiosity in you, that is the true point of the mystery. The search does not end here. We invite you to delve deeper, to question your own assumptions, and to keep exploring the edges of what we think we know. Share your thoughts in the comments below on which of these 25 artifacts challenges your personal view of the timeline most profoundly. And if you are ready for more journeys into history's greatest enigmas, subscribe to continue this ongoing dialogue together. The past is waiting, full of whispers, and the next discovery is always just beneath the surface.